Hey, good morning, everybody. So, this is going to be the watch list for Monday, February 3rd. And let's go ahead and start with the economic news and things that are going to be happening this upcoming week. First and foremost, the one thing that I don't particularly care for is we have a tremendous amount of Fed governor speak that's going to be happening throughout the entire week. And as you know, there's right now a tug of war between should the FOMC have a dovish stance on rates or a hawkish stance. Now, Jerome Powell in the last news conference said that we are just going to take this day by day and be data dependent upon the overall numbers. Now, this is nothing new as to what he's been saying before, but the market initially was coming into the year looking for 3 to 4 rate cuts. Now we're probably at maybe 1 to 0, depending upon how the administration handles the elephant in the room, which is tariffs. So on February 4th, we will have tariffs that will go into effect, 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada. Then Canada has a separate tariff on oil with 10%. We've also initiated tariffs on China. So does this turn into a global trade war that will ultimately raise the overall inflation rate? And if the inflation rate goes up, then the Fed is not going to lower. And the first lowering is right now projected to be sometime in the June timeframe. But if inflation moves higher, the FOMC is not going to lower rates. Now, I know the president came out and said that he's going to demand that rates go down. I can assure you that the FOMC is a completely separate freestanding body that does not report to the president of the United States. So no matter what he wants, says, or does, they do not have to lower rates, nor will they lower rates if the overall cost of goods and services that we consume goes up as a result of the tariffs. We will want to be very cognizant of the overlying economic factors that are being introduced into the market, because it's going to introduce volatility where the market will determine, are we overbought? Are we oversold? Right now, the market is quote unquote fully valued, meaning the only thing that will allow it to go higher is that companies are going to give better than expected guidance on the future. And usually the way companies do that is by having a lower interest rate environment. Cost of goods is lower, they can make more money. Interest rates are lower, they can make more money. So right now we are going in the exact opposite direction where rates are still holding high. So if we were to take a look at, where the rate structure is from the FOMC perspective, it's holding steady. Now, the housing market is another big piece that drives overall inflation. And right now, mortgage rates are above 7%, and they're about 7.75% for a jumbo mortgages. So homes are not moving, homes are not selling. And unless rates come down, that's not going to give us any tailwind to actually move forward. So GDP is strong, the job market is very strong, earnings are very strong, consumer spending is very strong. Now, the one thing that could put a wet blanket on all of this potentially are the tariffs. So we'll see how this plays out. Let's take a look at the individual days. So Monday, we have ISM manufacturing, we have our construction spending, and then we have the Atlanta Fed president, Raphael Bostic, speaking. The good news is that's going to be at 12 o'clock Eastern time for the most part. Obviously, all of you are usually done trading by then, right? You're trading the first 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, and then call it quits. On Tuesday, we have job openings, so we'll want to keep an eye on that. But based upon the employment data from last week, jobs are still strong. We'll be watching factory orders and then again, more Fed governors. So we never know exactly what they're going to say. So my recommendation is try not to be trading the market while they're talking, because you never know what piece of data feed the news media is going to pick up and then throw out there that creates excessive volatility. I mean, if you don't need to be in a trade, obviously don't take one. On Wednesday, we have our ADP employment. We have the trade deficit. Now, this will be interesting because the trade deficit will be rear view looking. So then we'll want to think through the commentary as to what we believe is going to happen as a result of the tariffs. Now, this will be happening before the market open. So you'll really want to pay attention to the pre-market on Wednesday morning. We have our final services PMI, ISM services, and then again, 3 more Fed governors. A lot of them are much later in the day. Thursday, initial jobless claims. This will be one that we'll want to watch, as well as productivity. Good news is before the market opens, 2 more Fed governors. And then Friday is going to be a fairly busy day for news. We'll have the unemployment rate. Is it going higher or lower? It's been holding steady at 4.1, but we shall see. I don't presume that it's going to go higher. Possibly it could go a little bit lower. We're also going to have hourly wages, so we're going to want to see, are people with a tight job market, are companies having to pay up more in order to retain talent? And then again, we have another Fed governor that's going to be while the market is open, Michelle Bowman. And then we have some wholesale inventories and then consumer sentiment. So what is the overall consumer sentiment of the market and consumer credit? So we all know that consumer credit is at an all-time high. The consumer is still spending. Usually what will stop that is higher unemployment. We're not seeing that, so I presume that what we're going to continue to experience, as we have over the last 2 weeks, is just a lot of back and forth. The entire market is expected to move up or down in a range of between 5% to 10% annually. So what does that mean? That means just a lot of back and forth. And that's why, for me personally, my trading style is to trade what I'm going to call is level to level between supply and demand and price points. And I'll explain more about that as we move forward for those of you that are new to following me. The other thing we have is we do have a fair amount of earnings this week, so we'll want to pay attention to that. On the larger side, we're going to have, and I'm going to look at this one this morning with you, is going to be PayPal. We have AMD coming from the overall chip sector. We're going to have Uber, which will be interesting because they've been selling off in relation to Tesla's robotaxi. So when you follow news events, it also sometimes gives you some really good setups. We also have Amazon that's going to be announcing earnings. And, what we'll want to listen to is what is the overall sentiment from each and every one of these companies. And then as we dwindle and get toward the middle to the end of February, then we should just be able to see a much better trend. So that's where we're at with the upcoming earnings. Let's take a look at some of the individual names. So what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and start with SPY. You can see again, my strategy and my style is trading level to level. So when we get to a level, we're either going to do one of things. We're going to reject the level, or we're going to break above the level, use it as support and go higher. And then when we lose the level, typically we will go to the next level. And you can see that that's exactly what happened on Friday with overall SPY as tariffs were coming into play. So we were on the market open. We're able to hold the level right here. And then we moved higher, and then we came back and retested the level, tested it here, and then we eventually came down, retested, moved on to the next level, pop up, go down to the next level, and now overnight we are heading lower. So what do I want to watch on Monday morning? Well, for me, my areas of interest are going to be this 599.64. Can we get back up to 599.64 and then possibly head for a reject lower? Or will we get above that, use it as overall support, and go long? Now, for me, I am not going to get into a long position until I can probably break this 675 level. I think when we're going to be in here, we just have too much chop. You can see over the prior days, they just chop back and forth between these levels. Is there enough room to take a trade? There is. But if you get any sign of weakness, you'll probably flush lower. So for me, I'd rather get above 600.75 before I take a long position. And then on the downside, my blue lines are my interim levels. So these are usually on a 15-minute time frame. My yellow lines are always on my daily 4-hour and 1-hour time frame that are the strongest. And so what I will be watching for weakness on the market open is a push down to 697.75. Do we hold that as support to potentially bounce higher? Let's take a look at the overall supply and demand on SPY. We are in heavy overall demand. So what does that mean? I would not want to just be necessarily going in with the bias of, while the market was heading lower, so let's keep shorting this thing. You can see we have a lot of buyers here just across the board. Now, does that mean that it can't go lower? Absolutely not. My belief is once we get below this 597.75, you will see that the buyers start to weaken, and then they really weaken on a lower time frame. There's only 30-minute zones, 45-minute zones holding up the market. So if we break below 596.65, my next target is going to be 594.43. Let's take a look at QQQ, and pretty much the exact same thing. We reject the level. They were rejecting it in the pre-market. They got above it, headed up. They come down. Again, this is a very strong price area for the market. 523.64, 523.52. We've been watching it over and over for the very longest time, all the way back here to December 5th, where if they can't seem to hold that level on the Qs, they just flush it lower. Now we are coming back to my next level of 519.30. I would want to see this hold for a bounce higher. And if not, my next price target to the downside is 517.15. Let's take a look at it with the overall supply and demand. We do have a fair amount of buyers here on the 2-hour time frame, so that I would not want to be shorting into. But if we get below 519 with some strength, I definitely think that we could probably push lower. Make sure that you're obviously using your Confluence trading and then watching some of the individual names that go with it. But right now, if the futures open strong, we're more likely a bounce to the upside. And then this resistance up top here is only 45-minute zones. So if we push up and hold, we could definitely go to 523. We hold that. They will bounce it. They will go to 525.40, and then we will start to move up back to 527. So again, for me, I like to just take it area by area, zone by zone, watch how price responds to either go in calls if we're going to hold it or puts if we fail down. Let's take a look at some of the names that were in the news last week. I'm going to start with Nvidia. So Nvidia definitely under a lot of pressure with DeepSeek and the news that came out. It was down, 18% on the day, rallied 7-8% the next day, right back up. And then what do? They just sold it right back down to the downside. So for Nvidia, I would be watching us to see if we can hold 116.85, where we held back here a couple days last week. And if we don't, then I'd be going to 114.77, which is a price point from way back in time. And then if we lose that, 109. Now, mind you, this one is in, again, very, very heavy overall demand. But on a price level basis, I think that these targets are achievable with some overall weakness. Now, mind you, this is the exact reason why I don't just look at the market and say, well, it's been going down and I think it's going to go down further. You just can't make the assumption that it's going to go down further when you have a ton of buyers right below you. Okay, so that's sometimes also why we will use this as confluence for QQQ and not necessarily trade the actual individual names. Let's take a look at another one. Tesla announced earnings last week. The earnings were awful, and they ran it all the way up. And then what did they do? Sold it all the way down. So this was on Elon Musk's comments around robotaxis, around robotics. The earnings were not good whatsoever. The delivery numbers, the profitability. He actually took some Bitcoin gains to actually shore up the balance sheet from an overall income perspective. So if we fail this 402 level, 400 level, I definitely think 397.26. We lose that and we're heading lower. Let me take a look at the overall supply and demand. You have relatively a strong level of buyers here on a 4-hour and a 3-hour time frame. But as soon as you lose that and get below 397 on weakness, they will just eat through these 45-minute and 30-minute buyers going to 378. And then you can see we don't have a high degree of buyers until we get all the way down here at 355. Now, mind you, this is one of those stocks that went up 100% since the last earnings announcement. I mean, it's been a rocket ship higher. So my bias, depending upon how the market is looking, I'd be looking for further downside in this one. Let's take a look at Meta. Meta had fantastic earnings, great guidance. They're going to spend a ton of money on AI, but they are one of the few companies that is actually profiting. off of that investment, whereas everybody else, it's still yet to be seen. So if I was going to look for some calls, I would want to see us touch this 682.58 level that was resistance. It's support. We're kind of grinding a little bit lower, but if we get some strength in Meta, I would be looking for the calls, and I'd probably be going for the 700s just because they're going to be fairly expensive. With a price target back up here at the prior pivot, use first price target of 700 because that's what the market will typically chase first, and then if we can get about higher than that, so be it. If we get on the weakness, then, possibly some puts, but don't be surprised if they buy it right back up here at this 676 level. So if you are going to go short and you miss the short in this, look for a potential bounce right here. And this is what I like to use as an interim level to see if this will hold. So there's a fair amount of liquidity right here that caused the market to get back above our price level. But if this doesn't hold, then 667.99 would be my next target. Let's take a look at Apple. Apple would have been a fantastic short on Friday. So in the pre-market, everybody in the pre-market is just buying this thing hand over fist, pushing it up 4% on no news. I mean, Apple didn't come out and say anything revolutionary other than they were not as fully invested in AI as some of the other tech companies. So what did they see this as? As more of a safe haven. So they literally ran it up on not so great earnings. I mean, they were good. They beat, but not by much, right? So earnings, the estimate was 2.348, and they came in at 2.4, a marginal beat. Revenue, the estimate was 124.26 billion. They came in at 124.3 billion. So they beat by 42 million. I mean, that's a rounding error with Apple's size. And so they pushed it up, and then as soon as the market opened, it just could not gain any traction all day long, and it just kept dragging down the overall Qs and S&P. So we are back to our price level of 232.92. I'd like to see, do they hold it and bounce it, hold it and bounce it, hold it and bounce it, or do they fail it, go lower to 230, and then maybe some overall common sense comes into play that Apple is very overvalued. Now, mind you, it's also had two double downgrades in the past several weeks down to a price target of 220 and 200. So that will at least give you something to shoot for overall. Let's take a look at Amazon. Amazon's going to be announcing earnings this week, so you might get a little bit of a run-up. So it's literally holding my price level at 236.03. It closed at 236.25. So again, knowing that earnings is coming up down here, which is going to be on Thursday, February 6th, this one could be some more potential for a bounce to the upside. But if it does falter before earnings and you're going to go short, you got to keep this one probably on a very short leash to see, do they buy it up at these consistent bounce levels that we've been seeing over and over again. So let me just go ahead and drop one on here of an area that I would watch, right? Interim levels between 236 to 233. This is pretty much the halfway point from 233 down to 230. But you can see they bought it up. They resisted it, bought it, and it headed higher. So we'll keep that one on the radar as well. As I said, a couple names that are also going to be announcing earnings is going to be PayPal. So this one is at a longer term support level of 88. I do like this where it was resistance, became support, holding. If we lose this before earnings, now earnings is going to be on Tuesday. So you basically have Monday to trade this, that you could get a decent bounce here to head higher. So I would keep an eye on that one. The other thing with PayPal is you can see that it was left for dead for the longest time, but on a valuation basis, it's trading exceptionally well, and it is significantly cheaper than all of its peers. So what I'm going to take a look at here is just from this pivot low right here to this pivot high. You will see what they have done is they have held the overall 50% fib level. And as long as we hold this 87.67, I think you definitely have an opportunity to go higher. This is bullish consolidation going into earnings. Came down, they rallied it all the way up, back up upon the previous pivot high. So as long as you don't lose 87.67, I think you're pretty much good to go for calls. So keep an eye on that one. The other one, again, that is highly recommended by the analysts has been Uber. Try that one more time. Here we go. So Uber, was at a price target high back here in October, all the way at $86. We're now trading at 70, but it's also been on one of the most favored analyst lists to go long. So what would I be watching with for Uber? Right now, again, it's been selling off heavily on just news with what's happening with Tesla. And again, the fear is that if robotaxis come into play, does that take Uber out of the game? So we have this overall bounce area right here at 67.84. I'd really like to see us be able to recover that in order to go long to the upside. You could see how they rejected it yesterday. It was kind of flirting with this line for the longest time, and now we are gravitating back up. Again, on earnings, knowing that it's coming up, I think this is an opportunity for you to watch. Can we get above 67.84 with a, again, rejection price target of 69.58? So probably play the $70 call. A couple of things that will be impacted by these tariffs are going to be the oil stocks. ExxonMobil announced earnings last week. Earnings were good. Darren, who's the CEO, great commentary, so on and so forth. He isn't really concerned about the overall tariffs, but yet the market is. So the energy sector is one of the least favored by all analysts. You can see we came down and touched the 106.06 level. What I would be looking for is if we have more weakness to take puts, and I would go out, obviously, this Friday's expiration with a price target of 105. I think we potentially could lose this to the downside. We have fairly low buyers, only 30-minute, 45-minute. We do get to the 1 day right here at the 106.06, which is why they bounced it. But we break below the 106.06, then definitely the 105 is something to keep an eye on. And then I'm just going to finish up real quick with Oxy. And this one's intriguing because this is one of Warren Buffett's stocks that he just keeps buying and buying and buying. And it just keeps going lower and lower and lower. So one or two things is going to happen. He's going to even buy more of this stuff, right, which will get a reaction. Or I would imagine at some point in time, he's just going to start trimming the position saying this isn't working. And I don't know how long he's going to hold it for. But it did get a downgrade last week, that it was downgraded by Goldman Sachs from a hold to a sell. Okay, so if the energy sector is a sell and we're seeing weakness in Exxon, Chevron, Occidental, and tariffs are going into play, which is going to increase the overall cost of the raw materials for the refiners, then their profit margins are going to go down. So this would be one that I would also be looking for a short. Very, very low demand where we're at 30-minute, 30-minute, 40-minute, 45-minute. We break 45. We don't have more buyers down here till 43. So what I would be targeting is the $45 put if you're seeing weakness. And then this one you might just have to hold for a grind lower. You typically in the energy stocks do not see the big volatility like you do with the technology stocks or an Nvidia or a Tesla where you have a lot of volatility. These typically just grind around and they take forever. They're at times kind of like the banks. So what I would be watching for, obviously, we had a sell-off on Friday. They tried to do a little bit of a recovery, but it's definitely headed lower. So those are just some of my thoughts and things I would watch, kind of a little bit more adage as to how do I trade. Very simple. There's a million strategies out there. I don't believe that one is better than the other. I believe that the best traders have a strategy that works for them, and then they stick to it. But then usually that strategy is a culmination as to how different traders like to view the market. So hopefully you have a better view as to how I look at it, things I'll be watching this week. And if you're interested, the masterclass is now open for the month of March. So go ahead and jump on in, as I would absolutely love to see you there. Those of you that have already taken the masterclass, I hope you're in the Discord with us. Ton of fun, ton of education, lots of live trading with Gus and Anthony, price levels, And 2025 is shaping up to be an amazing year thus far. So with that, thanks for listening. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll all talk soon.